What's up guys, how's it going? Today I will talk about the premiere of the solo leveling anime, which is one of the most famous works today. Let's get to the episode 1 summary. The anime starts off in a frantic way. It starts with an event 3 years ago on an island where a kind of marine was trying to attack some monsters and couldn't. So they had to call hunters, which is basically a category of people who are skilled and strong enough to do significant damage to the monsters in this world. So it already shows a battle between some hunters and monsters, and it's a very well animated battle. In this battle, we see that there are hunters who focus on short-range attacks, focusing on doing damage at close range through sword and dagger strikes. Furthermore, we were also presented with a type of support, which are basically hunters whose objective is to heal hunters who have suffered damage from monsters. And of course, as it is a support that generally will not have a relevant attack force remaining behind the teams. And it's obvious that these categories are inspired by RPG and MMORPG. In addition to showing a fight between a group of hunters and these giant ants, the anime also shows a type of hunter and boss commanding his troop as if a guild leader, to allude to RPGs for example. This leader seems like someone very strong and powerful, in addition to showing that he breathes fire through his hands, which already shows that in this universe there are superhuman powers, using mana for example. Another RPG feature that uses MP. After a very well animated and even exciting fight, they got a lot right with the animation of this fight, and the soundtrack too. Everything was very fluid. But anyway, after all this clash, the anime begins to explain a little about that universe and how it all started. Basically, 10 years ago, several interdimensional portals began to appear all over the planet, apparently. Yes, the anime talks as if there's no explanation of the origin of these portals. At least, it doesn't want you to know the origin right from the beginning, which indicates that the portals have an unknown origin for the majority of the population, including the hunters. These portals connect our world to an alternative dimension, where on the other side, that is, in the alternative dimension, there are various monsters of all types and sizes. These monsters are categorized as magical monsters. These monsters are practically immune to conventional weapons, that is, firearm shots apparently don't work, as the anime itself illustrated. We don't know so far whether this also applies to weapons of mass destruction such as nuclear bombs, but anyway, I believe it only applies to conventional firearms without great destructive capacity. As these animals are immune to conventional firearms, the only way for them to be defeated is by hunters. The hunter in this universe is basically a human being who has awakened the necessary skills to face these magical monsters. I don't know if these skills are tangible and logical, that is, if it's really something material, or whether these abilities are abstract attributes like a kind of morally heroic aspect, or whether the abilities are even physical or magical abilities that came about through pure luck and randomness. I really don't know which of these options is true. I just know that it made me curious to see the rest of the episode. Hunters are classified in rankings literally the same way players are classified in many competitive games. The rankings go from E to S from what the anime explained. The criteria for evaluating a hunter for the ranking, as explained in this episode, is based on the amount of magical power contained in their bodies. It is not possible to know with this information alone whether magical power comes from experience in battles or whether there is a lot of influence from fate. The ranking from worst to best is ranking E, D, C, B, A, and S, which is basically the highest level in this category of hunters. Now, the anime already shows us who the protagonist of the work is, called Jimwoo. Remembering that the international version of this anime will maintain the original names of the South Korean work, except for the version that will be broadcast in Japan, which will adapt the names to the Japanese language. So the anime already shows our protagonist is an E rank, and his appearance is that of a very thin, small, and even a little scared young adult, I would say, LOL. After presenting the protagonist in this way, our narrator of the story says that after the power, that is, this type of mana manifests itself in the hunter's body, there is no point in the hunter trying hard because this power will never increase. Here we already have a logic that is one of two: it will be easily broken by the power of the protagonist, or it will remain and our protagonist will have more magical power due to some external influence. That's what the anime made me think. So parting now for today, that is, 3 years after all this mess on that island. We have the anime introducing us to some D-rank hunters who are preparing for a D-rank dungeon. From the way the hunters act, the dungeons are really well leveled for their respective rankings. So the protagonist arrives there to prepare, and people start talking behind his back, saying that he is the weakest hunter, that he must be the weakest hunter in humanity, and a lot of other things that only weak people generally do. He speaks. It's no wonder that they are ranked D. Now, just because our protagonist is ranked E and suffers extreme difficulty in any battle, that's not why he should be belittled like that, right? Because in the heat of battle, you never know who could really be useful. Then the protagonist goes to talk to his friend Ju-hee, who already proves to be a person who is very concerned about the protagonist. She asks what happened to his face, and he says it was in an E-rank dungeon in which he was the only one who was injured. Here the script already wants to make it more than clear that the protagonist is absurdly weak, precisely so you already have this thought about him, that he's going to get screwed, that he's a weakling and so on. The girl asks if there wasn't a support in this dungeon, a support they call a healer. Sung explained that the other hunters didn't see the need to take a support. Then the girl says that they were very selfish, and Sung said that it was his fault for being so weak. Here he makes Sung's punitive thinking very explicit, where he thinks it's his fault for being weak. In my opinion, it's stupid not to take someone who can literally cure your internal bleeding. But Sung, unfortunately, is used to all this kind of thing. He normalized it. After all, he needs to be strong because we already see in this episode that his mother is in a coma and that he simply doesn't have a father there with him. So you have to support yourself and also support your sister, paying for her college tuition. So, I doubt that all hunters have responsibilities as heavy and big as Sung's, especially at his age, which must be between 16 and 20 years old. I'm just guessing here. So imagine, you have this huge responsibility, you screw yourself up working on something that you can literally die, and I would say even easily die. And on top of that, you need to hear a lot of things from other hunters who, in theory, should be focused on helping each other to survive. All the hunters get together and a leader is chosen, a certain Song who, from what the hunters themselves said, Song is the strongest among them, so it makes sense for him to be the leader. So everyone gets ready and enters the portal to the D-rank dungeon. One of the hunters even tells Sung to stay behind and be careful not to get hurt. At least he cared about our screwed-up protagonist. Sung looks at his dagger, which has little magical power but was the only one he managed to buy, and decides to enter the D-rank dungeon. Then the scene cuts to a conversation with President Go, who from what I understand, is the president of the Hunters Association, which maybe is a kind of hunters union, I don't know. But in short, these scenes from this president are basically to explain how the logic of having hunters in the world works and why they are in fact important. Hunters enter the portals to enter the dungeons and face the monsters. When they defeat the monsters, they obtain a type of essence stone. This magical stone is sold by these hunters to the government so that the government at a given moment can use all the magic of these stones as a renewable source of energy, being a much more ecological source of energy than all others of humanity. That's why it is in the government's interest for hunters to dedicate themselves and obtain as many of these stones as possible, because this way the planet will have a much cleaner energy consumption, which will bring a huge improvement in people's lives and the environment itself. Environment, consequently. Now moving on to the protagonist, he is already completely screwed while looking at a magic stone that he got in this dungeon. Then he is attacked by a generic goblin and is even pierced by his sword. It must have really hurt him. So Sung is all stretched out on the floor while the support, who is his friend, is there healing all his injuries. While she heals her injuries, Sung is watching all the other hunters duel and theoretically do well in battles while he is there all screwed up on the ground. As Ju-hee heals the protagonist, she questions him if he continues to be a hunter just out of stubbornness. And she still says she's worried about him. Look man, if this girl dies in this work, I'm going to cry like hell. I'm really going to cry. After he is cured, the group of hunters are disappointed at how little essence stone was found, because one of these hunters returned to active duty because he became a father and he really needed more money. Then a tunnel is found that seems very long. This tunnel indicated that it was a continuation of that dungeon or even a double dungeon. The group has 40 minutes to leave the dungeon after defeating the boss, so there would still be a chance for them to go through the tunnel in search of more essence stones. A vote was taken to decide whether they would enter the tunnel or whether they would just return to their world. The vote ended in a 6-6 tie with Ju-hee, who voted for everyone to return to her world. So, Sung was the deciding vote, the casting vote. At that point, I was already sure that everyone was going to die because this guy was going to choose to enter the tunnel. And all said and done, the father here doesn't make one mistake. He chose to continue the dungeon exploration and go through the tunnel. He chose this at a time when he was thinking about money, that he needed this money to support himself and his sister. And anyway, he chose that option and everyone entered the tunnel and continued their exploration. It then shows scenes of an S-rank hunter who rescues a stolen bag for a woman and shows a little about another hunter who is strong and apparently rich. Anyway, I didn't see anything too much in these scenes to comment here. In fact, I thought it was unnecessary to put these scenes in this first episode. They could just put them in the second episode in a less tense moment, for example. Now, continuing with our protagonist. As he and Joo-hee are walking through the tunnel, Sung apologizes to Joo-hee for voting for them to go through the tunnel. He asks if everything is okay and she says no and that she's worried about him because she barely healed his arms and legs and even asked if he hit his head too because it looked like it. So he apologizes and she says that if he understands, he should show his gratitude by taking her out. This girl is an attacker, bro, she doesn't miss a single one, haha. Man, this girl is amazing, she is very charismatic and she seems to really care about the protagonist. Then the group arrives at a kind of giant door and everyone starts to get absurdly scared. By then, it was possible to go back, but people decided to continue. They entered a kind of room full of giant stone statues. Seriously, they are impressive statues that are so big. So, one of these statues is holding a writing saying to venerate God, and whoever doesn't venerate it will basically be punished. I think I've seen this at a certain time in humanity and you know what I'm talking about, right? Then Joo-hee tells Sung that she saw the biggest statue's eyes moving as if its eyes were following her. After everyone finishes reading the crazy stone commandment, the giant door closes and everyone has their pants down, you know, LOL. That was just the gate closing. Then one of the hunters who apparently voted against this excursion gets angry and tries to leave the room in the end. The moment he touches the door, one of the statues near it moves and cuts the guy's head off with everything. The statue simply capped the guy in 2 seconds. Then everyone starts to get scared and the protagonist goes into shock, wondering why that hunter died so easily since he was rank D, the same rank as that dungeon. At least, it was the same rank as the dungeon before the tunnel, right guys, LOL. So the protagonist thinks, wait, if these statues are moving, then he looks back, staring at the biggest statue in the room and realizes that there is going to be trouble. At the time, he has a flashback remembering that several times he almost died in the dungeons, showing that he was always weak and that for him it was always life or death, showing the reason why he is so alert. In fact, when the president of the Hunters Association is talking about being a hunter or not, he says that the most important thing for a hunter is to be afraid. And on that, I agree. After the flashback, he yells for everyone to get on the ground. He probably already knew it was going to be a problem because he was always on the verge of death. No matter how peaceful the dungeon was for others, he almost died in different ways and he always had to be on the lookout, waiting for an opportunity to attack or, of course, even escape. And in this case, he was smart. He quickly tells everyone to get on the ground, but that doesn't stop the statue from burning a bunch of people using some kind of crazy laser beam vision. Then everyone starts going crazy and saying that they are all going to die and that everyone is screwed and the episode just ends. What did you think of this premiere? I particularly loved it and I'm really looking forward to watching the second episode. What about you? Tell us in the comments what you thought of this premiere and what you expect for the next episodes. I'll stay here until the next video.